Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, Dutch lacers, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. Let's go back to the good old USA and go into this topic about selling out a little bit more as it pertains to this post-election analysis that's going on out there. And of course, there's just a plethora, an avalanche, mountains of analysis going on out there about what's changed for the Republicans because of the election of the so-called outsider and the dumping of the status quo candidates and then moving over to the Trump era. And then we have this Democrats supposedly imploding and having to look inside and all these crazy analysis looking in all directions about what went wrong with the Democrats this year. All this stuff is a lot more complex and a lot more simple than most of what I'm reading out there. But what a spectacle. I love the fact that, and for all practical purposes, the Democrats and the Republicans and the status quo media out there were all crumbling from this debacle that happened out there, all of them essentially being wrong across the board. And living in this era when the Republicans undermine some of their own candidates and the Democrats undermine some of their own candidates and sabotage each other and sabotage themselves is really an interesting new twist in the way these election cycles work and the way these so-called status quo parties work. And like I say, there's all this talk about being dismantled how did one article put it? It's going to lead to a reconstruction of a mythical great America, or it's going to accelerate us into global corporate governance, depending on your view, and this can come from both sides. But what I find interesting about this discussion is, I guess I'm cynical enough now that I look at the fact that probably in some ways a lot's not going to change, because let's remember the whole Tea Party movement came and went, and then some of these candidates got into the government, like Mark Rubio and Paul Ryan, and supposedly embrace all these Tea Party values and end up just being a new wave of the status quo. And we get a lot of that with the Democrats as well. The Democrats, why would they be surprised at what happens when you can't really tell what happens in this last election, when you really can't tell the difference between Democratic policies and Republican policies once you take Bernie Sanders out of the quotient? And then the discussion whether the Democrats are going to move towards the Bernie Sanders camp or the Republicans are going to move towards the Trump camp, and time will tell. But I've seen before where they talk about soul searching, and there really isn't a whole lot. I remember the Republicans did a lot or did some soul searching when Barack Obama got reelected twice, and yet during this election cycle we ended up with a lot of the same status quo Republicans out there trying to maintain the Republican status quo system, and that's the way it works. And the same thing with the media. Well, let's remember how hardcore Fox News used to be the neocon station. I remember watching the Iraq War unfold on television and on Fox News in that whole era, the Bush era, when Fox News was nothing but neocons and that whole hard right-wing warmonger policy. And then after the last election of Obama over the last 8 years, of course, they moved in a more libertarian direction. So-called the neocon parts of Fox News seem to dissipate. And so these things come and go. I'd love to see the Republicans re-examine their whole platform and adopt something akin more to Ron Paul policies or some of the policies that Trump has purported, but a lot of ways it seems like the status quo is too entrenched and has too much invested in the old ways to give that up. And the same thing with the Democrats. They might do some soul searching, but they're going to be looking for Hillary Clinton light next. They're not going to necessarily be embracing the Bernie Sanders platforms. And so I just have to believe that the Democrats will continue to be another corporate warmonger party and not really represent the people, which has traditionally been the Democratic role. But ironically, we could see the Republican taking more of a populist workers angle after all these years of being stereotyped as the party of the rich and the wealthy and the Wall Street, particularly after this election where Trump got nearly zero support from Wall Street during the election. It all went to Hillary and the Democrats. And then the media they'll do whatever sells tickets to the circus, and so they really have no principles and no real investment. They'll adapt whatever stance they need to get ratings. So anyway, there's my cynical look at the supposed implosion of the Democratic Party as we know it right now, the implosion of the status quo Republican Party as we know it right now, and supposedly the implosion of the media after they completely blew it during this election cycle. Probably in 4 years it'll all look much the same. I'm a useful idiot, don't you be one too?